We continue now at the top of Daf Tesam at Aleph and Mesechet Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 9a. The Mishnah says, Kinidrei Rishoim Nadar. Let's say a person says that he's taking upon himself like the Nedarim, like the oaths of the wicked. So then we're going to say, Ben Nazir uvekarban uveshvua. That can obligate the person as a Nazir, or obligate him to bring a carbon, or obligate him in terms of an oath. Kinidrei kesherim. But if a person says he's taking a neder like people who are kosher, like good individuals, lo amar klum, that's nothing, because people who are ksherim, they don't take nedarim at all. Kinidvosam. Now let's say instead of saying like nedarim, he says I'm doing it like the nedavas, like the gift offerings of the ksherim. So then nadar ben nazir uvekarban, and then it could be that he is obligated in terms of nazirus and in terms of a carbon. And the Mefarish over here says, Kinidrei Rishoim Kagon Shaya Kikar Munach Lefanav. The case is, let's say there was a loaf of bread in front of him. V'yamar Kinidrei Rishoim. And he looks at that loaf of bread and he says, I'm taking upon myself like the Nedarim, like the oaths of the wicked. Mashma Da'oso Kikar Yehei Olav Kinidrei Rishoim. So what he's essentially saying over there is that kikar should be treated like the way Rishaim would make a neder. And since he says this, so now he has made a neder in terms of becoming a nazir, in terms of having to bring a carbon, in terms of shvua. And if he should eat that loaf, so then mechayev nazirus the carbon ushvua. He's going to be chayev in nazirus, and he's going to be chayev in carbon, and he's going to be chayev in shvua. The chayev nami carbon shvua the darkan shal rishoim. He's chayev this carbon shvua because it's the way of the rishoim who shenodrim ben nazirus with a carbon vinishboin. This is what they do. They make themselves into nazirus, and they bring carbon, and they obligate themselves in these things carbonos shvua. V'hai kiyamar kenidri rishom have a command damar hareini nazir emochel heimenu. It's as if he said, I will be a nazir if I eat from it. Like a carbon, and it's going to be upon, and this loaf is also going to be to me like a carbon, and I'm making a shvua that I'm not going to eat it. So if I do eat it, I'm going to be a nazir, and I'm making a shvua, it's going to be treated like a carbon that I am not going to eat it. Now the Ran has a slightly different explanation, which fits in a little bit better. And the Ran says like this: Kinidrei Rishoim Nadar ben Nazir beCarbon uveshua hachmasi sinami perusha de yados. See, first of all, this Mishnah also is a continuation of explaining yados, when you say a partial phrase in order to make the oath. Umefarshinan beGemara dehachi Gemara. The Gemara explains as follows: The Imamar Kinidrei Rishoim hareini v'haya Nazir over lefanav. So case number one, according to the Ran, is he says Kinidrei Rishoim hareini, and there's a Nazir in front of him. So hareyu Nazir. Then what he's saying is he's going to be a Nazir, and he becomes a Nazir. V'chein Imamar Kinidrei Rishoim alai chayev carbon. If he says Kinidrei Rishoim alai, then he's chayev a carbon. That's how the Ran understands. Again, the way the Mefarish said it, it wasn't so much that he was chayev a carbon, but it was that he's treating the loaf like a carbon. And he says that also, that is true if there was an animal in front of him. Then he's essentially saying he is obligating himself to bring a carbon. If he says heimenu shelo ochel when he says Kinidrei Rishoim v'haya kikar munach lefanav, and there's a loaf of bread in front of him. That's again how the Ran understands hareu b'shvua shelo yochlenu. That's a shua that he's not going to eat it. The point of the Mishnah, in any case, whatever the specifics are, the point is when you use the phrase Kinidrei Rishoim, so then you're chayev. Shareho Rishoim darkon lidor b'cholelu, because it's the way of the Rishoim to make nedarim in these fashions. So the point of contrast in the Mishnah is when you say Kinidrei Rishoim, that is going to be a good neder, because the wicked are the ones that make nedarim like this. If you say Kinidrei Kesherim, it is nothing, because Ksherim do not make nedarim in this fashion. But if you say Nedava, Kinidvosam of the Ksherim, so then it is going to be an effective oath, or it is going to be an effective promise to bring this donation. And the Gemara says, V'dil mohachi kamar. So the Gemara says, maybe when he says the phrase Kinidrei Rishoim, maybe he means as follows: Kinidrei Rishoim lo nadarna. Maybe he means to say, I'm staying away from the nedarim of the Rishoim. How do you know that he's making an oath that the Rishoim make? Maybe he's saying, I'm not making an oath that the Rishoim make. And so the Gemara answers, Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, Ba'omer Kinidrei Rishoim hareini olai v'heimenu. He says a phrase, Kinidrei Rishoim, and then he uses either the word hareini, or the word alai, or the word v'heimenu. And the Gemara explains that each phrase refers to something else in the Mishnah. Hareini ben Nazirus. If he says hareini, what he's saying is he's taking upon himself a Nazirus, to be a Nazir. Alai, if he says the word alai b'carbon, then he's taking upon himself carbon. And heimenu, and if he says the word heimenu b'shvua, then he's taking upon himself an oath, like the idea we said, an oath not to eat this particular food. The Gemara says hareini is nazirus. Dilma hareini b'tainis kamar. If he says hareini, why do we assume that's nazirus? Maybe that means to say he's obligating himself to fast. Hareini b'tainis, I'm going to fast. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says kishahaya nazir over lefanav. It's when there's a nazir in front of him, and this is what the Ran has already mentioned. And heimenu b'shvua, the Gemara says that we said above that if he says the word heimenu, that implies an oath, a shvua. So that means an oath that he's not going to eat a particular item. So dilma heimenu da'achilna kamar. Maybe the heimenu means that he is going to eat that item. Who says he's not going to eat that item? Amar Rava says da'amar heimenu shelo ochel. No, he says it clearly. He says heimenu shelo ochel, meaning to say that I'm not going to eat the item. So the Gemara says, if so, ma'i lamemer. So what's the chiddush? Of course he's saying that. So ma'u detema, no, because what might you have thought? He didn't actually say any words that had anything to do with taking an oath. He just said this word of not going to eat without saying words of shvua. Kamash malon hadain, and so that's what the Gemara is teaching us, or that's what the Mishnah is teaching us. And the Hagos over here on the side says tevas hadain nimchak. Take out the word hadain. But in any case, kamash malon. That's what it is teaching us. It is teaching us that even though he didn't say anything in terms of shvua, he just said the phrase heimenu shelo ochel. That is enough to count as a shvua that he's not going to eat it. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Kenidrei Kasherim Lamar Klum, Kenidvosam Nadar V'chulu. The Mishnah at the end made a distinction between Nidrei Kasherim, which is nothing, but Nidavos of Kasherim is something. And the Gemara says, Man Tana Deshani Lei Ben Neder L'Nedava. Who is this Tana that makes this distinction between Neder and Nedava? Leima Lo Rabbi Meir V'Lo Rabbi Yehuda. Let's say that it doesn't follow Rabbi Meir or Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanyas were learned in a brayso. Tov Asher Lo Tidor. It says better not to make a Neder. So Tov Mizeh Mizeh She'eno Noder Kolikr. The best is not to make a Neder at all. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says what the pasuk means to say is the best thing is not to make any Nedarim at all. Rabbi Yehuda says, Tov mizeh mizeh, noder mashalim. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's better to actually make a neder and do and fulfill the neder that you made. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not necessarily better not to make any nedarim. That's not what we mean to say. What we mean to say is that the best thing is to make the neder and pay up, but to make a neder and not pay up, that's very bad. So in any case, the point of the Gemara is neither Rabbi Meir nor Rabbi Yehuda make any distinction between neder and nedava. In our Mishnah, we're making this distinction between neder and nedava. And the Gemara says, Afilo Tema Rabbi Meir. You could even say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Beis.